To celebrate 25 years of Omnibus, we begin a season of classic films from the Omnibus archives. Tonight's programme, made in 1967, is an exploration of William Blake's enigmatic poem, Tyger, Tyger.
Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?
Mr. Blake died at 6 o'clock in a most glorious manner. He said he was going to that country he had all his life wanted to see. He is to be buried on Friday at 12 in the morning.
The year 1827. A friend's letter about the death of William Blake, who was buried in an unmarked grave in the old London cemetery at Bun Hill Fields. Blake wrote 2 poems that practically everyone knows. Jerusalem has been adopted by the Women's Institute, becoming their anthem to the English way of life. But why do so many people react so strongly and so differently to Blake's other poem, which strikes no proud or patriotic chords? It's neither hymn nor nursery rhyme. Why do so many, old and young, know or partly know or think they know or want to know the Tyger?
Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?
Some things stick in your mind and others don't, and that's one of the ones that does.
What is it that makes the Tyger have such a powerful effect?
It's sheer magnificence, its strength, latent power, a brute beast, perhaps coupled with its glorious colouring. The lion is just an ordinary drab buff colour, but the Tyger, he's like reflected sunlight, shadows dappling across him, the contrast of white. I think William Blake put it so aptly when he said, Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. You can imagine it in the dark green of the forest, burning there. The very thought makes the back of your hair rise. This huge, glorious golden animal looking at you through the darkness of the forest.
There are 6 verses, 24 lines in the Tyger, which Blake published as one of his songs of experience in 1794 when he was 27 years old. Like all his poems, he engraved, decorated, and coloured it himself.
Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
When I was a Christian, I loved Christ very much, when I was in my teens and so on. Now I love Blake very much. He's as important to me as Christ was then.
I think he's perhaps the very greatest Englishman that ever lived.
The poet, Robert Graves, has lived in Majorca for the last 30 years. In Goodbye to All That, his autobiography of the First World War, he describes how he kept Blake's poems with him in the trenches. Today, Graves takes a strong though fairly common line on the Tyger.
The Tyger was written in a fit of extreme schizophrenia, and he said people call him mad. Well, in a sense, he was mad, but not by the MacNaughton rules.
William Blake, born 1757, died in 1827, the same year as Beethoven, that other stormy and revolutionary spirit. William Blake, poet, painter, and prophet. Called mad in his own lifetime, too, by another poet, Wordsworth. But even Wordsworth said,
There is something in the madness of this man which interests me more than the sanity of Lord Byron and Walter Scott.
Blake was a mystic who painted an extraordinary world of his own imagining. The 18th century stifled Blake with its decorum, humbug, and sense of order. It made a god of reason and let imagination die. The Tyger, like all Blake's poems and pictures, takes life from his own private, luminous view of what is real.
Is Blake nearer the truth than most, or is he further away than most? Is the man mad? Is the man really saying something which goes very deep indeed? Blake's Tyger, it's a great image. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
I like this a lot, you know, for the same reason I like that Yeats' Second Coming poem, because of this power and these sort of fabulous images. I mean, just the straight Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. I mean, it's banal, you've heard it so many times, but it's fine, you know. This is something you can keep thinking about and keep seeing.
Doesn't progress too much for me. And especially the circle of bringing the first verse to the last seems to round it off right back to the beginning again. I don't want to go back to the beginning again.
Yeah, it's an immediate poem, and I think that's why he put the first verse at the end. It's an immediate experience. It's now. You're involved with it all the time. Well, while you look constantly.
Is the Tyger for you? When did you first meet the Tyger?
Actually, I haven't seen it before today.
You haven't?
No.
You don't know the Tyger?
No.
Is it the sort of poem you'd want to live with?
Yes, it's strong. It's a hard-hitting poem.
Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?
What's the effect of that great kick at the start where he says Tyger, Tyger twice? And the obvious response is to say, well, it's an invocation to the Tyger. If you look at it, I think that's just not true. The way of testing it is to put "O Tyger" at the front of it, as though it were an invocation, "O Tyger, Tyger." And you realize at once that he isn't saying, "O Tyger, Tyger." He isn't that pally with the Tyger. He's saying, "Tyger, Tyger," as though he's standing in a position of almost awestruck wonder and he's naming the name so as to begin to have some sort of grasp of it. But this is quite different from saying, "Oh, daffodils," or "Oh, tiger." And it's that kind of immediate, trance-like almost, rapt quality of standing before it and knowing in an almost awestruck way that you are about to penetrate something you haven't really penetrated before, that leads you into the poem.
I think it's a good poem, but it is a bit difficult to understand from first sight.
What parts of it don't you understand?
Well, you have to understand what the poem is about. First of all, when you look at it, you think, oh, it's just about the tiger, but when you read it again, you find it's more than that.
I don't think this poem's anything like any other poem, I don't think, really.
I like it because of the description of the tiger and because it has a one big question in it.
What is that one big question?
Well, did God make the tiger or didn't he?
I see. And you think this is an important question?
Yes, sir.
I don't particularly like this poem. I've read a lot better. But I think it would do for me. I don't like reading it. I don't like listening to it. But I don't particularly dislike it anyway.
Can you say
why?
why?
It's a normal poem to me.
Why
well,
you
it doesn't
dislike
get through to me any meaning that is strong enough that this question, did God make the tiger? Well, I should think if he made anything, he made the tiger, and I can't see whether it's got any importance.
The Creator took a chance when he made anything as fierce and damaging as the tiger can be. He took a great chance with us when he made human beings with instincts for power, for lust, for pride, which have done a certain amount of damage in the world. Blake's point was that we have to bring all these instincts of ours together and make a creative whole of them by using our imagination to try and understand what it's all about. So in this way, Blake was one of the great religious artists of the world. He was preaching a spiritual message, and that tiger is part of his spiritual message.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Was the tiger burning?
No, sir, it's a description of the tiger's coat, because it was yellow and it resembled flame.
It's a description of the coat?
Yes, sir.
The tiger wasn't on fire?
No, sir.
I see. What do you think, Roy?
It said tiger, tiger, burning bright in the dark night or something like that.
In the
well,
forest
if it's coat and it's a dark night, it can't be its coat because it won't be able to be distinguished.
Well, is the tiger on fire then?
No, it must be some quality that's referred to as burning bright.
What is that quality?
It's the tiger's overall sort of way of life.
In the poem, it strikes me as being a very evil and terrible animal. But I find, on the contrary, I find them often more placid and friendly.
Burning suggests an enormous power and energy focused in one direction.
It's a very strong word there.
Very powerful. I mean, another way of testing it for strength is to substitute a word and say, tiger, tiger, shining bright. And the poem's just dropped in the middle like a pudding that's gone flat.
The burning sort of colour and movement of it presents an incredible picture to me, you know, with the dark green of the forest and the burning orange of the tiger, and even the white of the lamb, and the sparkling of the spears of the stars. Everything about it, and the furnace and everything, just a terrific picture. Never mind the meanings or the words or anything. Just even hearing it the first time, it had this tremendous picture, full of movement and colour, blazing out at me.
But I don't think it's terribly important to know exactly what a poem means, as long as it appeals. I don't mind what it means or what the poet meant or what it says, as long as the words personally appeal to me. I think this is the important thing with a poem.
Why did the tiger strike home to you?
Because you can see such a clear picture of it, I think, from the first line. The jungle, the open grass, the prey, hunting for food. It's very striking, I think. Very exciting.
But it's not just an animal poem, is it?
I think so, yes.
I think it's a remarkable beast. I mean, I empathy with that beast. I am, that wild. Yes, I think it's a noble beast.
I see the tiger as wholly terrible, magnificent and terrible, but I wonder if it is wholly bad. But in any case, most of us have got both the tiger and lamb in ourselves, haven't we?
I'm not concerned with such minorities as good and bad, which I don't think can be, simply explained.
What one has set up here is the sense of power and energy, making for order and control. And what is it ordering and controlling? What is it working towards? Well, uncreated chaos, mess, disorder. The forests of the night, I think, all those vast, uncharted complexities, thick and impalpable, that we feel are around us, whether we're children waking up in the middle of the night, or adults realizing the appalling confusions of human life.
One of my colleagues who works with children remarked that he thought this is the poem was very much like the sort of dream you'd expect a little boy to have of about 4, say, waking up in the middle of the night and finding his hand over his erect penis. That there's it certainly lends itself to an experience of confrontation of a ferocious and alien energy, which in our world, which it needn't be, is often found, first of all, in one's own body, in terms of one's sexual feeling.
Nobody can be indifferent to that poem.
Blake rewrote his poem many times, and his own manuscript shows the alterations and cuts he made. In one early draft, he called the tiger cruel.
This word cruel, is the tiger cruel in any real sense at all?
Well, I mean, I've always felt the tiger not as a frightening beast. It's always appealed to me as something rather nice. And I think if the cruel had been in, it might have made a difference to my feeling about it.
If he's going to use it as a proper symbol, he mustn't then try and condition it by using the word cruelty or anything. He doesn't want to suggest to you anything but what you yourself feel for any symbol he uses.
Good point.
And if he's going to start putting cruel, he's going to start putting kind, desperate, anything, and it's going to immediately lower that symbol, make it far more compact and less useful as a word.
Right, this is a good point, a very good one. So cruel goes.
In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes?
Why do you think, in the second verse of the poem, Blake asks the question, in what distant deeps or skies? What have the deeps got to do with it, if it's all God's work?
I think there, I'm not sure of the answer to this one, but I should have thought that he's still working within a symbolic framework where he thinks of heaven as up there and we're down here. So that it's in the depths of infinite space that he envisages the creative act being born.
So deeps and skies couldn't possibly, to your mind, be hell and heaven?
I don't think so, no.
Blake's wondering whether it's made by the devil or God.
I think that's very good. I think Blake is wondering that in a way, yes. And what do you think his answer is? Do you think he decides who made it?
I think he decides in the end that God made it.
What makes you say that?
Well, I assume he's a Christian. And in the last line he says, who dares to frame the symmetry of the tiger? And well, if he's a good Christian, could only be one person who would dare to.
Do you go to church?
No. I'm an atheist.
What shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet?
And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? There's something odd about this verse. What is it?
The inconclusive end is sort of what dread feet, well, I think it was inconclusive anyway.
The inconclusive end. This is, of course, the same true to the last draft. In fact, it can make sense in a sort of way if you look at the possible solution in the first draft. What dread hand and what dread feet could fetch it from the furnace deep, and in thy horrid ribs dare steep in the well of sanguine woe? In what clay and in what mould were thy eyes of fury rolled? All cut, and yet he leaves the question inconclusive. Now, is this a fault? Do you guess Blake struck the lines out and didn't bother to improve the grammar, or what?
Well, it gives you room to imagine, doesn't it? I mean, it's much more powerful without the solution.
More powerful?
I mean, the dread, it could be anything. And
Is it really confused here, Mandy? The what dread hand and what dread feet? Whose dread hand? Whose dread feet?
Well, it doesn't matter. It's just, dread. As he's put fearful in the first line, he has, and dread in the first verse, and dread in the third, and it's all a mystery. And you're not really supposed to know. It's up to people to feel for themselves what it is. He's not going to tell you. It's just dread. But not a cruel dread, a sort of, as Kathy said, awe-inspiring.
Awe-inspiring. Are the dread hand and the dread feet necessarily the tiger's dread hand and dread feet, or necessarily the creator's dread hands and dread feet in this?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily either.
Well, the difficulty is it doesn't quite make sense. There's that verse, "And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet?" Well, you think, he's thinking of God as making the tiger, and where do the feet come in? Is he thinking of a potter who puddles clay with his feet, or is he thinking of a smith who blows the bellows with his foot? But it somehow leaves you in the air, and also this mixture of tenses could twist it, and then dare, although it's in the present. And I was puzzled about this, and so I naturally had the idea that I'd better go back to the original, which is the Rossetti manuscript. And I find that the feet have been left over from a verse which she suppressed. And it was like this: "What dread hand and what dread feet could fetch it from the furnace deep, and in thy horrid ribs dare steep, in the well of sanguine woe? In what clay and in what mould have thy eyes of fury rolled?" Well, now, he realized that was bad, because first of all you have feet and beat, and then deep and steep, which are too closely rhymed together. And it's all the sanguine woe, he realized, is a bit of eloquence, not poetry. And so he cut it out, and he left the word feet in the air. And he didn't really care. And in a way that was honest of him, but it makes rather a mess of the poem for the reader.
Graves has made his own arrangement of the tiger, cutting out 2 verses and putting the whole poem in the past tense.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dared he aspire? What the hand dared seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? Did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dared frame thy fearful symmetry?
Well, what's he done to the poem? Amanda, you say he's ruined the poem. How can you have ruined the poem? He's a poet.
To rewrite a poem of somebody else's who is a better poet anyway, I think, and tell us what we should read into it. And, to cut out half the verses which Blake wanted to put in there, therefore should be there. And to sum it up for us so that we can understand it, but he's so patronising it, because we're incapable of understanding Blake. And just because he can't understand Blake, he assumes we can't.
Well, the only verse that remains unchanged right the way through from the first draft to the last final version is the one which begins, "And what shoulder and what art." And he's cut out the last 2 lines of that verse, the ones which we were arguing about, what dread hand and what dread feet. And yet those are probably the only ones that Blake was really sure about.
He's cut these out because he says the question, and what dread hand and what dread feet, is imprecise and ambiguous. He ties it in with the stanza in Blake's first draft, which follows, "Could fetch it from the furnace deep," and says that Blake got into a muddle, crossed out his lines, and then left the thing grammatically incoherent at the end of it, and so the whole thing had better go. Would no one like to defend Robert Graves on this?
Well, on principle, yeah, I would, say he's got perfect right to do what he likes to the poem, really. I mean, as long as, on principle, but just in practice, it hasn't turned out in any way as good a poem.
Cutting out the present tense, it just takes all animation away from the poem at all. Because whereas with Blake, you're in it. I mean, you can't help being involved. With Gray's version, you're just sort of sitting back and looking at it and saying, well, there's this tiger and this lamb and God, and, you know, what are we going to do about it?
I mean, the Blake's mystery means much more than... I mean, Gray's is just... It may work properly and it may all be grammatical, but it means so much less, doesn't it? I mean, it may... I mean, why should the sort of rationality of Gray's mean more than... I mean, I don't think Blake's muddled anyway. I mean, if he is, everything's muddled. I mean, the whole creation must have been quite muddled. And so, I think it's ridiculous, Gray's.
I don't think you can try and rationalise it. I mean, all right, we know about Blake as being a sort of anti-rational almost, and I'm not sure if he doesn't just mean this poem to appeal just lower down than the straight rationalist.
What's the hammer, what's the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What's the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp?
I learnt it as a child. It was taught to me in a very special way. Taught to me as if it were a poem about how God were able to create the world. You know, he'd made the flowers, and here he is making the tiger. That's because I went to a school which was really run like a sort of Methodist Sunday school. The whole school was run like that. Every poem was in fact a little poem about God's grace and power. So I learned it like that. I think it's clear that in my first learning of it, something else came through, because what I then thought was that it wasn't really about God's ability to create the world. It was a description of a tiger, and for a long time I actually thought of the poem quite differently from what it actually is. I actually thought it was a kind of picture of a tiger. Then I've read it again, and I've taught it, and every time I have to teach it in a different way, or read it in a different way, and I see something that I've not seen before. So, I think that must mean that I don't quite understand it. I don't understand it all.
I definitely don't believe that it's a bad thing, a tiger, and I think he's really trying to praise it.
Does it tell us anything about the characteristics or the qualities of whoever made the tiger?
Yes, it says that who dare have made such and such a thing of the tiger, of his body.
What does this tell us about the person who made it?
Well, he was strong, stronger than the lion, in fact.
Stronger than the tiger?
In the tiger.
Yes.
But I think the poet's trying to compare God to the tiger. The beauty of the tiger is trying to build up a picture of God, although he's talking about the tiger.
Why should he do this? This is very interesting. Why should he do this? If he wants to write a poem about God, why doesn't he write a poem about God? Why should he choose a tiger to do it?
Because nobody's seen God. He's thinking, well, a tiger's beautiful, therefore God must be beautiful, because God made the tiger.
So he's taking something...
he's describing this tiger as if it was God. It means to show that God has many qualities. That if he has created the holy lamb, and he has created the tiger, therefore he's got both kinds of qualities, and some more as well. It's not just the tiger qualities.
I think I've changed my mind a bit. I think that the poem is not really statements. In fact, I think that this is really nearly all questions.
Well, it is, in fact, yes. If you had seen the text, which you haven't, you would see that every single sentence is as a question. Why?
I don't know. I should say that he doesn't really know, Blake doesn't really know all that much about the tiger. And he's trying to sort of find out, really.
He's asking questions.
Yes, sir.
What's the effect of asking questions rather than making statements?
Well, it puts a bit more mystery into the poem.
The opening of the poem reminds me irresistibly of a picture by Douanier Rousseau, which I may get it slightly wrong, but as I remember it, what you have is an immense overgrown green forest which nearly chokes you. I think it's the forest of the night. And out of that, I think it's a lion, a very odd lion, as always in Rousseau, peering, and its eyeballs are boring through it. And I remember seeing that first when I was a child and knowing that's it. And one of our children felt the same way. And I didn't mean that it's Blake. I mean, I know what that's about, even though I couldn't have said it. And whenever I hear tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, I want to pin it under that Douanier Rousseau. I'm sure it's, at the imaginative level, they're operating in, they live in the same world.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes?
On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart. And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What's a hammer? What's a chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What's the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he, who made the land, make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
Most children are taught the tiger at one time or another, in one way or another. The words strike home in spite of or because of their mystery. Is the tiger good or bad? God's creature or the devil's, or neither? The poem is a challenge, a real test of the reader, a test of thought and feeling, and his own attitude to life. One puzzle is why Blake drew such a placid tiger at the end of the poem, a toy tiger with a sheepish grin.
I haven't a clue. I just haven't a clue.
I think that they're enormous dark forests, you know, with all the vines hanging down and everything, and there's just this prowling tiger going through, and you're alone in it. And you just feel all alone when these great big glaring eyes look into you, and you're just petrified. Just can't do anything.
You like the poem?
Yes, I like it. It just makes me imagine myself somewhere else, carries me away.
I like it because it gives you a feeling that you're all alone in the forest and this great big creature is looking at you.
And what do you like about that?
Well, its coat is sort of burning with its eyes glaring at you.
And why is that nice?
I don't know, really.
But it is.
Yes, I know it is.
The fact is that for a very long time, the tiger has been the symbol of what is called the Dionysiac principle. That is, say, that ecstatic way of thinking and feeling, which is incorporated in the legend of Dionysus, who went to India and brought back tigers. And the tiger is, which Blake very rightly contrasts with the lamb, is the indomitable urge of the human spirit to be and do.
Well, I think the poem is, it's very easy to imagine it, and you can imagine the tiger with all its muscles and it's padding along glossy run, and its muscles running along its back and its bared teeth and brightly shining eyes, and I can imagine me just running away. And I think it's beautiful, tiger, in a kind of fierce kind of way, and I just don't think I could look at it without, you know, some kind of fear shuddering down my spine.
He seems extra fierce than other tigers. But he doesn't say anything in the poem about killing anything. But he just looks fierce. He sounds fierce in the poem.
Do you think it's a good poem?
Yes, very good.
I like the way the river moves. Very pleasant river.
Does it remind you of anything, the way the rhythm goes? Any other poem you've ever heard?
No, but I don't read many poems.
What about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, How I Wonder What You Are?
Yes, it is like that, isn't it? Different sort of poem, completely different.
When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee?
The Tyger's one of the few poems by Blake that still survives in his notebook. That fifth verse began like this. No punctuation. The word Blake crossed out are set here in italics, and his alternatives in the manuscript are set below each other. Blake finally put back some cancelled words and adopted the line order that he wrote on the left-hand side of the verse numbered 5 by him in his notebook. First line to be third, second to be fourth, third line first, fourth and last line, and watered heaven with their tears, to be second. There may be a fine frenzy in the finished poem, but he revised the drafts very carefully indeed.
When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? What does one ask of this verse?
It's quite straightforward that he made this tiger who's so incredibly terrible and he's sort of surrounded in blazing light, and that even the stars, who were pretty sort of untouchable, even they were horrified and threw down their spears and cried and everything. And then he just wondered, you know, could he have made, or one wonders in fact, Blake is asking you, could God have made this fantastic creature as well as making the ordinary little lamb? You know, there's such a contrast.
Is that right for the stars?
Well, surely this is a sort of a day of judgment image, a reconciliation image, you know, more than an image of the stars being horrified by what they see. I mean, the only way I could see it was the stars watering heaven was a kind of melting together into a kind of great luminous, you know, day of judgment, clouds of glory sort of thing. The sky sort of brightening up with the stars all melting together like tears.
When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee?
I think there's a contrast between the tiger and the lamb, but I don't think it's a contrast between good and evil. A contrast between something innocent and something experienced in the ways of the world, yes. But much more, the tiger seems to me to be a beast that has a kind of life of its own, separate from the divine, separate from God. In that sense, almost a human, physical animal, an existence that has its being in that world rather than in the divine world. And I think the poem is about creating such a being with a sort of sphere of existence of its own, which is not necessarily evil, but physical and hard and contained within itself, with its own sort of dynamic, its own laws, obeying its own laws. Nature, I should have thought, more than evil.
You don't think that Blake intended the tiger to stand for evil in the poem?
I never really thought of it that way, but I don't think so. A little further on, I don't remember the playing awfully well, but did he say, he who made the lamb made thee? Or could he who made the lamb made thee? I think they're both God's creatures, and I think Blake would have made a more satanic origin to the tiger if he meant it to be evil.
What is it most of all that draws you to Blake?
Well, my great-grandfather, as a young man, was a pupil of Blake's. He was actually with him when he died. And so from quite early childhood, we had rather a special interest in him.
Some people have said that Blake was mad, or at least partly mad. What do you think?
I don't think so. He was a visionary. I know that when great-grandfather had known he'd gone for a walk and he had come back, he asked him what did he see, and he said, I saw angels in a tree. I don't think he was mad. He was gifted with a vision that perhaps we haven't got.
When people start talking about Blake as a visionary, well, this is true. But I think that everyone sees visions, and that, you know, usually people separate the visionary from the rest of humanity. And if he was separated in that way, I wouldn't be very interested in Blake. But I think that everyone sees visions. Children see them most strongly, but usually they're just told, well, you're daydreaming, and daydreaming is a very inferior activity, which isn't encouraged. Some artists, Blake included, think that their daydreams are very important, and they work at their daydreams, and they use their daydreams. Most people lose the ability to daydream, except in a very small kind of way. They don't develop it to the incredible heights that Blake took it to, where he could daydream whole systems and galaxies. People feel the need for this, which is partly why people are attracted to Blake. It's partly why people are attracted to drugs, because then they can have daydreams and take them seriously, because the drug imparts some kind of spurious authority to the dream.
But you don't think that the authority that Blake gives is spurious in that drug-taking way at all?
No, because I think he was in control of his dreams, of his daydreams, or visions, whichever you like.
When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee?
If you think it through rationally and attach a meaning to it, are you necessarily going to be any more the truth than if you simply respond to the image without in fact analysing it?
But surely if we all respond totally differently, I mean, if we see the stars horrified by this, and if we see the stars as a sort of reconciled at the end, surely if the image has invoked so many responses, he might just well not have written it down if he's trying to communicate something.
Blake was a puzzle to his contemporaries, and he remains a mystery today. He thought of himself as a Christian, but the only time he went to church was to be married here in Battersea to the daughter of a market gardener. At that time, she could neither read nor write, and in the register, she signed with a cross.
He had a marvellous wife, Catherine. One of her great remarks was when she first saw him, she decided to marry him, and she said, "Young man, I pity thee."
Blake was always isolated from conventional religion, belief, and comfort. His Tyger is a visionary beast, made not by God, but Satan, compounded of both good and evil, and seen by Blake in its essential nature, according to the poet and authority on his work, Kathleen Raine.
On several occasions, I have had the kind of experience I imagine Blake to have had continuously, and I'm bound to say the experience was quite overwhelming and unforgettable after 20 or 30 years.
What happened?
I was sitting one evening at a table with a hyacinth in a glass in front of me. I was writing, not thinking of anything in particular, when suddenly the plant was transformed before my eyes. It was an instantaneous change of perception, and what had formerly seemed merely an object I perceived as a living being. One could see, experience the life, the nature, the very essence and being of this plant. It was extremely simple, but if one were to see the world continuously in its full being, I imagine it would always be so, and this would be a different kind of consciousness which would transform, literally, the kind of world that we live in.
And that was Blake's world?
I think that was Blake's world continuously, and this is why his second creator, his Satan, his demiurge, is so often with him identified with the rational faculty which constricts and limits our mode of perceiving and experiencing the world.
So finally, in fact, Blake would have to reject his Tyger.
That is
made by Satan, made by the demiurge.
There again, the Tyger, I think, contains the germs of so many future ideas. He would certainly reject the Tyger insofar as the Tyger is the selfhood, but insofar as the Tyger is a portion of energy which is eternal delight, I don't think he would ever reject his Tyger. I think he saw the essence of the being of the Tyger in the way I've tried to describe seeing a plant in its full being, and whether the creature be a Tyger, a stone, a plant, or say perhaps it happens most often when we are in love. We see someone transformed before our eyes. This is an experience we can never reject, because that is the fullest possible consciousness of reality of which we are capable.
And it's what it's all about.
It's what it's all about, yes. And that is what poetry, insofar as it is, as I believe it to be the language of the imagination, is, or ought to be, all about.
How much does the poem matter to you?
A lot, and difficult to tell why that's so. It matters because it's got so much force, and the force, I think, comes from the fact that it's so hard. Its images are so hard. They're gem-like. They're like rock almost. And I think the power of the poem comes from the fact that although its surface and its images and so on are so firm, yet they reverberate out. They sort of capture, themes and meanings which are much more indefinite, much more indistinct. But you can never move away to the themes. The poem doesn't point away from itself. It always keeps coming back to its own very precise questions, its own very hard surface. And that's what gives it a kind of completeness in my mind, almost like a stone, like a rock, like a jewel.
Does the poem for you have a happy ending?
No, it has an ambiguous ending, an ending which is also in some ways terrifying. And that's, I think, because of how I think of the poem moving. It seems to move from a point where God, or whoever is the creator of the Tyger, has control over it. And as the poem goes on, the Tyger gains a life of its own. I think it always had. I notice the way in which you're never quite sure whether it's God who makes the heart start to beat. It's almost as if he gets the elements together, but suddenly the heart starts to beat on its own account. As the poem goes on, the Tyger seems to escape his control.
Sort of Frankenstein touch.
Yes, it's something which he has a sense of wanting to make, and he knows how to draw them together. But the more he beats, the more quite different thing comes into life. And at the end, there it is, much more terrible, much more other than he'd imagined it to be, and he's a little bit terrified of it. Now, that's not a happy or sad ending, but it does give a sense of, well, almost as if you watch this beast come alive in the poem, through the poem, and watch God move from a point where he can control it to the point where he has to recognize it and salute it at the end, something separate from him.
Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could friend, thy fearful symmetry. Dear friend, thy fearful symmetry.